Hey, tonight we walk through fog and frost with a man so short he had to look up at his enemies, but still managed to make Europe kneel. You're standing in the stillness of a December morning. The earth is hard beneath your boots, the kind of frozen that creaks when you move and bites through your soles. Around you, the white mist coils in tight spirals, hiding the battlefield of Austerlitz just for now. The smoke hasn't risen yet. The cannonballs haven't begun their flight. But the weight of the moment already presses in. There's something electric about it, like the air's holding its breath. You feel it on your skin, cold, dry, and oddly expectant. You're not exactly sure how you got here. Somewhere between the whispers of generals and the shuffling of weary soldiers, you slipped into the middle of one of the greatest military maneuvers in history. And as you stare across this valley, you know what's coming. But you also kind of don T.A.U.S.T.E.R.L.I.T.Z, Napoleon's masterpiece. A battle fought not just with bullets, but with illusions. With timing so precise, it feels like theater. With deception so brilliant, it still sparks arguments over dinner tables and academic journals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Press the notification bell to update many new videos. And hey, let us know where you're listening from, and what time it is right now. Always fun to know who else is wandering through history with us in the middle of the night. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, frost crackles beneath your heel, and the world shivers around you. It's the early hours of December 2nd, 1805. You're somewhere just outside Brno, in what is now the Czech Republic. But tonight, it's a patch of contested earth between Napoleon's French army and the combined might of Austria and Russia. The Third Coalition, they call it, sounds fancy, but really, it's a lot of coats, confused officers, and horses, with absolutely no idea what they've signed up for. The French are outnumbered. That's the first thing you notice. Nearly 90,000 troops against Napoleon's 70,000 or so. But the French are well rested. They've been camping here, waiting, watching, planning the Allies. They arrived late, rushed, hungry, confused. The Russians spent 2 months just getting here from Poland, and some of them still smell like road dust and regret. You step closer to a small rise, the edge of what will soon be the infamous Pratzen Heights. Right now, it just looks like a lumpy hill, but Napoleon is counting on this hill to be empty by morning. Historians still argue whether it was a stroke of tactical genius or just extremely good luck. Did Napoleon actually predict the Allied commanders would abandon this high ground? Or did he just get absurdly lucky that morning fog and overconfidence did half the work for him? Regardless, you're here, watching history vibrate in the hush before the storm. Behind you, French soldiers mutter over cups of thin wine. Some are sleeping, others are oiling muskets or fiddling with torn gloves. No one really talks about the upcoming battle. It's more about boots, stomachs, whether someone remembered the salt. The usual, that's another thing that always gets lost in history books. How boring waiting for glory is. But glory's coming. You glance to your left and spot movement slow, calculated, careful. It's a small figure pacing just outside his tent. Short, sharp features, hand tucked inside his coat. No hat. He hates hats. Napoleon Bonaparte, the little corporal, l'empereur, the man who would crown himself. Depending on which textbook you read, he's either a visionary or a maniac with delusions of grandeur, or both. Definitely both. And tonight, he's walking alone, like a man rehearsing a magic trick that only works once. A sentry sneezes. Napoleon doesn't flinch. He keeps walking, tracing invisible lines through the air, whispering to himself. He's counting, you can see it, not sheep, but regiments, columns, flanks. He knows what's coming, or he thinks he does. That's the genius and the gamble. You hear a horse whisper beside you. A soldier, probably in his 20s, leans in like he's telling you a secret. He's seen it already. Says he saw it in a dream. Fire on the left, ice on the right, sun right overhead. Just like Rome. Says he's already won. You don't ask what he means. Not yet. Instead, you step toward the edge of the hill and look down into the fog-cloaked valley where thousands of lives will soon spin, stumble and fall. Somewhere below, the enemy camp is waking up, too. The Allied forces are groggy and hopeful. They believe Napoleon is weak, retreating, desperate. The fake dispatches worked. The stage is set. A night owl screeches nearby, and you jump. Right. You're still in the middle of this. You lean against a tree, suddenly aware of how many eyes are out there. French, Austrian, Russian. Every one of them trying to guess what the others are doing. But only one man is certain. Napoleon turns on his heel and strides back to his tent on tomorrow. He'll write a letter to Empress Josephine. Not about love, not really, mostly troop placements. A little bragging, one line about the weather. He'll tell her what he expects, what he knows will happen. Then he'll go back out and make it happen. But tonight, all you can do is wait and shiver and wonder. If you could see the map he sees in his mind, would it look like battle plans or a magic trick? The inside of Napoleon's tent is warm. Not cozy warm, but ambitious. Warm just enough heat to say, I'm not sleeping outside like the rest of you. You duck under the canvas and let the flap close behind you, careful not to trip over. A stack of polished boots that look like they haven't been near mud in days. The candlelight dances across a cluttered wooden table, highlighting a map so detailed it's almost dizzying. Every hill, every stream, every shrub between Brno and Austerlitz seems to be accounted for. It looks less like a military plan and more like a painter's obsession. And there he is, Napoleon. He single quotes as not standing. He's hunched forward, one knee, on a chair, chin resting lightly on his knuckles, as if the fate of Europe rests somewhere between his fingers. The infamous hat sits on a crate nearby, ignored. His coat is buttoned up only halfway, and his boots are off. Turns out, history's greatest tactician doesn't fight wars in shoes. You again, he mutters without looking. His voice is low, as if he's always slightly bored by everything that isn't war. You have an irritating habit of showing up just before my best moments. He finally turns, and there it is, that look. Not madness, not exactly. It's the eyes, sharp, not blinking enough. Like he's solving 5 problems at once, and 4 of them involve tricking you into losing a kingdom. People joke about his height and, yes, fine, he's not towering. But when he looks at you, you feel ... smaller, like he sees through your clothes, your bones, your lineage. Like he's measuring whether you're useful in a war he already won in his mind. Historians still argue whether his success was mostly luck, timing, or raw brainpower. But from where you're standing, it's clear, this guy is the human version of a chess clock that never runs out of time. On the table beside him sits a pile of letters. You notice the top, one fancy, formal handwriting. It's from Tsar Alexander of Russia. Apparently, they've been writing polite threats to each other all week, like war pen pals with really bad boundaries. Napoleon smirks and flicks the letter away with the back of his hand. He thinks I'm retreating, he says quietly. He thinks he'll catch me fleeing like a wounded dog. He leans in, so tomorrow I'll let him chase me. Let him think he's winning, then he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. Instead, he points to the map. There. It is the famous bait. Napoleon's right flank, deliberately weakened, or so it appears. By drawing the Allies into an attack there, they'll stretch themselves thin. Then, while they're tangled in confusion and cavalry, Napoleon will strike at the center at Pratzen Heights, strike through the gap they never thought to guard, that hill, he says, tapping it gently. They'll leave it. They always leave it. You raise an eyebrow. And if they don't, he shrugs. Then I adapt, but they will. History teachers like to argue over how much of this was real planning versus retroactive storytelling. Did Napoleon truly expect the Allies to fall for it, or did he just get incredibly good at improvising? He'd probably say, "Does it matter?" Behind you, someone clears their throat. It's martial, Soult toll, elegant, and perpetually carrying. An expression like someone just told him a joke he doesn't approve of. He offers a short nod to you, then hands Napoleon a sealed envelope. It's another update from the Scout Sostrian movement near the Southern Road. Napoleon doesn't open it right away. "Tell me," he says, to no one in particular, "how do you convince two emperors and a field marshal to walk into a trap?" He smiles, amused at his own joke. Soult clears his throat again. "Perhaps," he says, "you look small and unimportant, like a man they underestimate." Napoleon grins. "Then I hope I never grow an inch taller." You can't help but notice that he enjoys this. Not just the war, but the drama of it. The build-up, the mind games. It's not about bullets or bodies. It's about outthinking men who believe themselves your betters. Outside the tent, a trumpet sounds soft and distant, a signal. It's nearly midnight. Soult excuses himself. Napoleon returns to the table. His fingers trace the outline of the enemy's flanks. You notice small marks next to each regiment's symbols. Only he seems to understand. There's a beauty to it, really, as if battle could be reduced to brushstrokes and momentum. He finally speaks again. "I won't fight along. War," he says. "They want me cornered. They want me worn down. I'll end this in a day, a beat." He glances at you, "But only if they do exactly what I want." You wonder if anyone's ever told him no. Probably not twice. He stands, stretches, and finally puts his boots back on. "You should rest," he says. "Big day tomorrow." You don't move, because out there in the dark, nearly 150,000 men are tucked into frozen bedrolls, unaware that in a few hours the world will tilt beneath them. And here, in this tent, lit by flickering candlelight and madness, a 5'6" man with a pencil and a grudge is about to paint the masterpiece of his career. Outside the tent, it's colder than before. That biting kind of cold that slides behind your ears and sets up camp in your spine. The fog hasn't lifted. In fact, it's thicker now, denser, like the battlefield is trying to hide itself, which is ironic, considering the theater you're about to witness. You walk slowly through the camp. Fires are low, soldiers huddled around coals like moths too tired to care if they burn. There's quiet laughter, some muttered prayers, and one particularly Competitive game of cards played with what appeared to be strips of bark. You turn a corner past the officers' tents and find a small table under a worn canvas awning, a stack of letters bound in twine, unmarked, sealed, deliberately smudged. These are the lies. Their dispatches false ones, dozens of them. You know because you peek at one when no one's looking. It's a report from Marshal Bernadotte saying the French right flank has suffered losses, that they're retreating toward Vienna, that Napoleon's forces are panicked. It's all fake, planted, designed, precision-crafted bait. If this war were a stage play, these would be the props. Some of these letters have already leaked into Austrian hands. Others have been left inconveniently abandoned supply wagons. One was even carried by a French officer who accidentally got captured during a scouting mission. Oops, historians still argue whether Napoleon invented military misinformation as a strategy or just weaponized gossip like a French auntie with too much wine. Either way, it's working. You spot two junior officers muttering nearby. One's grinning. They think we've pulled back half our army. Poor fools. When they charge Pratzen, they'll be walking into ghosts. That's the phrase that sticks. Ghost armies. Troops that aren't where they seem. Columns that appear to vanish into fog. Reports that suggest weakness, when in truth, the forces are coiled like a spring beneath the mist. It's all sleight of hand. If hand grenades were involved in magic shows. You head east toward the edge of camp, where the French right flank is crumbling. Only, it's not. The soldiers here are doing something strange, making noise. You hear fake orders being shouted, hammers clanging, carts rattling with empty barrels. It's all carefully orchestrated to sound like panic, like retreat, like a withdrawal in motion. But then you peek past the noise and see the men, dug in, waiting, smirking. They're not going anywhere, and you realize you're walking through one of the boldest illusions in modern military history. Back up the hill, a small rider appears, a courier horse, steaming with sweat and breath in the cold. He's come from Napoleon's headquarters, and he's clutching a letter, one of the real ones. You think, this one's meant for Marshal Devout. Devout is guarding the actual right flank. Miles away and marching overnight to be in place by dawn. In a move that historians still argue over, Napoleon is stretching his forces thin on purpose. Risky, of course. Brilliant. Also, yes. Devout's the Third Corps is making a forced march covering over 70 miles in 2 days. Their arrival by sunrise is the linchpin of the entire plan. If they're late, the French line could break, the trap could fail. But if they make it, well, the right flank suddenly becomes a guillotine. You turn back toward camp, heart weariedly racing for a battle that hasn't even begun yet. The drama is unbearable, and no one's even fired a shot as you walk. You notice something else. A small group of men sitting around a crate, scribbling. They're writing letters to their families. Final ones. They don't say as much, but you can tell by the way they pause. The words they scratch out. One man stops writing and leans toward you. Can't decide whether to be honest or poetic. He says with a shrug, "She likes the poetry. But if I die tomorrow, I'd rather she just know I was warm tonight." You offer a weak smile and keep walking. What do you say to that? Ahead, a drummer boy, probably 12 at most, is trying to tie his boots with fingers too cold to bend. His hands are red and raw. He notices you watching and grins. "Big day tomorrow, huh?" he says, chipper in the way only a child too young to understand death can be. You nod. That's what they say, he shrugs. I just follow the loud ones. Somewhere to the south, across the frozen fields, the Allied camp is stirring. You can't see them, not through this fog, but you know they're there, reading the wrong dispatches, preparing the wrong maneuvers, marching unknowingly into the exact position Napoleon has drawn for them. It's like watching a chess game where one player has rigged the board to slide, every pawn exactly where he wants it, and you can't look away. You step onto a small ridge, boots sinking into the crunchy topsoil. From here, you can see the edge of the Pratzen Heights. Just a hill, nothing impressive. But by this time tomorrow, it will be the most valuable piece of land in Europe. Napoleon wants it empty, needs it empty. And everything you've seen, the forged letters, the planted rumors, the ghost troop sits, all working toward that one goal, making the Allies think they're winning. Even now, Allied scouts are probably sending back cheerful reports. French in retreat. Right flank vulnerable. Pratzen unguarded. You wonder if they've ever read a story backwards. Because that's what's happening here. You look back once more toward Napoleon's tent. A small light flickers within. He's still awake. Of course he is, because tonight he's playing the entire continent like a violin in a minor key, and no one knows it yet. It's sometime between midnight and not quite morning, the kind of hour that doesn't have a name, just a temperature and a sound. The cold has thickened. Even the fog seems tired now, slumping against tree trunks and sagging over tents like a heavy blanket that's decided to nap. You slip once again beneath the canvas flap of Napoleon's command tent. The space is dim, warmer than outside, but not by much. The small iron stove in the corner sighs as it exhales smoke through a crooked pipe. It smells like ash, ink, and ambition. The Emperor sits at his campaign desks, still in full uniform, minus the boots, which now rest at odd angles on the floor like two exhausted dogs. A map lies open before him, weighted at the corners with mugs and folded gloves. Candles flicker against the yellowed parchment, their light trembling with every shift of air. You half expect him to look up and snap at you, but he doesn't. He's speaking quietly to Marshal Berthier, barely above a whisper. You catch fragments. Soult will hold the center. Devout on the right. When they abandon Pratzen, he stops mid-sentence, looks up, smiles like someone who just remembered your name in a dream. Still awake, he says softly. Good. I'd hate to be the only one enjoying this. You stay silent. The silence seems appropriate. Here, like noise, might unravel the thread of whatever plan is hovering in the air. Napoleon leans back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The Austrians, always so eager to be clever, so desperate not to look weak. That's how you beat men like that. You let them try to impress you. He stands, abruptly, begins pacing. It's not an anxious pace. It's more like ... choreography. Like his feet already know where the morning will take them. Berthier watches without speaking, probably used to this. His job is to keep up, to remember, to issue the orders precisely. Napoleon's mind moves fast. If you blink, you miss a campaign. The Emperor pauses near a crate stacked with satchels. He opens one and pulls out a pair of clean gloves, sniffs them, frowns, tosses them back in. His fingers drum the top of the crate. You know, he says. Suddenly, I once read all of Julius Caesar's commentaries in a single week. You raise an eyebrow. This feels like one of those detours he takes when he's too keyed up to sit still. I was 13, he adds, as if that clarifies anything. You wonder if he's bragging or confessing. Historians still argue whether Napoleon modeled himself too closely on Caesar or whether he merely borrowed what he needed and improved the rest. He was always collecting pieces of the past, sewing them into his mythos, like patches on a traveling coat. Outside, the wind howls suddenly. The canvas flaps tremble. Napoleon doesn't flinch. He walks back to the desk, fingers trailing across the map. You lean in to look closer. Lines crisscross the valley like veins. Arrows curve and dive like birds in mid-flight. The Pratzen Heights sits in the center, emptied by the enemy's own strategy. Just as planned, just as hoped. "We'll attack at 9, he murmurs, "but not before. They need to be committed. They need to be tangled." Berthier nods and jots something in a small book. Then a shadow appears at the flap. It's Marshal Lannes. He steps in without ceremony, brushing frost from his shoulders. He looks tired, that kind of tired only soldiers and new parents know. Reports from the outposts, Lannes says, holding out a folded sheet. Russian troops are moving south, just as expected. Napoleon grins. Let them go. Let them chase ghosts. He tosses a crumb of bread into his mouth from a plate that hasn't seen heat in hours. Chews slowly, swallows like he's trying to swallow the hours until dawn. You glance around the tent and notice something odd. No bedroll. You suddenly realize he's not planning to sleep. Napoleon catches your gaze and reads the question in your eyes. "Sleep," he says flatly, "is for people who don't intend to rewrite the world by breakfast. You try not to." Roll your eyes. He might be joking. Maybe. He sits again, but only briefly. Writes a note, folds it, seals it, hands it to Lannes. Send to Devout. If his cause isn't visible on the flank by dawn, I want the road clear for a second message. No delays. Lannes nods, salutes, and vanishes into the fog like a man walking straight into a novel. You shift your weight, suddenly aware of how long you've been standing. "Go walk the lines," Napoleon says, eyes back on the map. "See if the men are ready. See if they're afraid." You start to leave, then pause. He looks up again. That glint, again cold, unreadable. "They should be," he says. And then he turns back to the paper. Outside, the wind scrapes the trees. Fires crackle. Footsteps crunch. The night is pulling its coat tighter. You head back into it, breath steaming. Past tents, horses, whispers. Past men curled in their coats. And boys too young for this war. And you carry with you the sense that the battle has already begun. Not with bullets, but with shadows. With the pacing of a sleepless man who thinks 3 moves ahead of gods and emperors alike. Dawn is still a rumor when you reach the eastern edge of the battlefield. The air is sharp with frost, and the sky above is ink blue, softening only slightly toward the east where the sun is stretching behind the hills, still deciding whether it's worth showing up. And then you hear them, not cannons, not drums, not even horses, just ... brass, trumpets, high and haughty. Split the morning stillness like a spoiled child entering a funeral. The Tsar has arrived. You climb a low ridge for a better view, and what a view it is. Flashing metal, silken banners, ridiculous hats. The Russian Imperial Guard glitters in the dull light like they didn't get the memo. This isn't a parade. Alexander I, Emperor of Russia, King of Poland, and unofficially Napoleon's least favorite chess partner, is finally here. And boy, is he making an entrance. Dozens of officers ride in formation around him. all broad-shouldered and cold-nosed. Their uniforms so meticulously pressed you'd think a tailor had set up shop mid-march. The Austrians, who've been here for days, look on from their camps like someone just walked into their kitchen in white gloves. Asking for PT, the coalition isn't just to army zits, to egos. On one side, the Austrians, led by General Kutuzov, grizzled, practical, and perpetually skeptical. On the other, the Russians, led by a man whose cheekbones have diplomatic immunity and who might actually believe God chose him to outshine. Napoleon, historians still argue who was really in command that day. Technically, Kutuzov. In practice, Alexander, and that's the problem. You watch as the Russian emperor dismounts with dramatic flair, cape fluttering as if caught in an invisible wind machine. He strides toward the Austrians with that particular gait of someone who's been told too many times he's the smartest man in the room. Kutuzov greets him with a bow so shallow it's basically a shrug. They exchange pleasantries, very cold, very civil, very royal. But beneath it all, the tension hums. Alexander wants a victory. Today, glorious, cinematic, imperial. He wants to be remembered, Kutuzov. He just wants to survive until lunch. Nearby, you spot General Weyrother, the Austrian planner-in-chief, frantically pointing at a map like a man trying to explain spaghetti to a cat. He's overexcited, overconfident, and how to put this gently completely out of his depth. His plan is simple: attack Napoleon's right flank, hard, roll it up, break through, chase the French like dogs all the way to Vienna. You're trying not to laugh, because you've seen that right flank. You know what's actually waiting there. It's like watching a man proudly run into a trap wearing a monocle and a blindfold. Still, the Allied command is giddy, convinced Napoleon's army is scattered. They believe they have the numbers, the initiative, the divine right, and Napoleon. They think he's in over his head. You watch Alexander nod solemnly as Weyrother delivers his plan like a child reciting a school poem. The Tsar approves. Kutuzov visibly winces. No one cares. The plan is set. Pratzen Heights, currently unoccupied by French forces, will be left unguarded by the Allies as they focus southward. In other words, they're giving Napoleon the high ground without even asking him to fight for it. Back in Napoleon's camp, someone probably just high-fived you. Glance down and notice the Russian troops moving into place. Columns shifting, artillery trudging into the muck. They're confident, marching like they already hear victory music playing in their heads. One particularly shiny officer shouts orders so loudly he startles a horse into sneezing. You follow a group of Russian cavalry as they circle toward the southern road. The fog is lighter here, but it still clings like smoke to their boots. They can't see what you see. The illusion, the bait, the gaps that are not really gaps. A junior officer near you leans toward another. The French are practically gone, he says smugly. We'll push through the flank by mid-morning. Then it's just a matter of sweeping the valley. The other nods. I hear the Emperor plans to ride through Austerlitz before sunset. To send a message. You don't ask what the message is, because you suspect Napoleon's message is going to be much louder. As the troops shuffle past, you notice something odd. Several senior officers are arguing about coordinates. Loudly, publicly, even now, especially now, the coalition is deeply, chaotically uncoordinated. Russia wants glory. Austria wants revenge. Their unity is, at best, a diplomatic handshake held together by winter coats and wishful thinking. Napoleon knows this, has counted on this. He's banking on them pulling in opposite directions, while his forces snap like a spring into the center of their mess. You take one last look at Alexander, standing near a fire now, warming his hands like a man about to take a victory portrait. He looks composed, regal, ready. You wonder if he's ever been punched in the face by a hill, because tomorrow, that bump of land behind you, the Pratzen Heights, will do just that. You stand atop the Pratzen Heights now. The fog has pulled back just enough for you to see it clearly, this gently sloping, utterly unremarkable mound of dirt that just so happens to hold the keys to Europe. From up here, the valley unfolds in slow rolls and hushed whispers. The terrain looks soft, deceptive, like it might sing you a lullaby before burying you in musket fire. You shuffle forward a few paces, careful not to crunch the frost too loudly. It's quiet now, just before dawn. Still, not calm, never calm, but still in that tight, nervous way that makes your heart match the rhythm of marching boots you can't even hear yet. The Pratzen Heights don't look like much. They're not. Mountains, barely even hills. But up here, you realize why this little rise is everything. Elevation, visibility, control. It's the axis around which Napoleon intends to spin the world. He's banking on the Allies abandoning it, which, by some miracle of ego and miscommunication, they've done. Their forces are marching off it even now, chasing Napoleon's weakened right. A gift, a spectacular, absolutely bonkers gift. Historians still argue whether giving up the high ground was military malpractice or just a temporary tactic gone sideways. Either way, you're standing on one of the most strategic blunders in military history. Congratulations. Below, you spot the French, the Third Corps, beginning to appear devout. Men, arriving just in time, like background actors hitting their marks. Dusty, exhausted, likely running on cold beans and sheer spite. But right where they're needed, you crouch beside a pile of dry grass and imagine the Emperor's perspective. He's not here yet. Of course, that's the trick he's waiting for. This hill to be entirely abandoned before pouncing, like a cat watching a rocking chair slowly roll away from the mouse underneath. Back in the Allied lines, you can practically hear the optimism. They believe Napoleon is on the run. They believe their southern push will crack him open like a soft-boiled egg. You're tempted to send them a postcard from the future instead. You wander along the ridge and spot a few French scouts already, creeping uphill, silent, focused. One of them even whistles softly something that sounds like a nursery rhyme, oddly cheerful in the pre-dawn stillness. You ask him why he's smiling, because, he says, eyes scanning the horizon, we're standing on their grave, and they haven't even noticed. You try to laugh, but it comes out awkward. Probably because it's not actually a joke. He tips his cap and keeps walking. The fog clings to the base of the hill, like it's trying to protect the Allies from their own decisions. You glance to the north, where French forces lie in wet silence. Watching, coiled, Napoleon's plan is painfully simple. Let the enemy come. Let them stretch. Let them believe. Then retake the Pratzen Heights at the perfect moment, strike at their soft, exposed center and fold their army in half like a poorly written love letter. The Allies will be split, the left in chaos, the right floundering, and Napoleon, standing on this very hill, will watch the battle unfold like a conductor watching his orchestra nail the crescendo. Except, of course, there's still the matter of timing. Every piece has to move exactly right. The French left has to hold. Devout's cause has to arrive on time. And the Allies have to keep marching, blind and happy, right into the snare. No pressure. You hear distant murmuring from below columns, on the move. The Russian army is shifting into their final positions. They've left the heights. The trap is wide open. Still, you wonder, was this all part of Napoleon's plan, or was it a gamble? A rolling of dice hidden inside 1,000 confident speeches? Historians debate this endlessly. Some believe he engineered the abandonment of the heights with precise manipulation. Others say he couldn't have predicted it, only reacted with genius once it happened. But you're here. You saw the fake dispatches, the staged retreat, the pacing in the tent. This wasn't luck. This was design. You crouch again, brushing snow from a low stone. There's something eerie about this place, like it knows what's coming, like the ground itself has braced. You whisper to no one, they gave it up. And somewhere in the valley below, a cannon thuds once just once. The sound rolls up the hill like a cold wave against your spine. It's starting. You rise slowly. No need to run. The machine is already in motion. Soon Napoleon will mount a horse and ride this hill like a throne. Soon the Allies will realize their mistake, just as the French flags crest the height they should never have left. Soon this bump of earth will become legend, and you'll be standing right in the middle of it. The sky is turning pale now, like someone spilled a little cream into the edge of night in the French camp. The fires have burned down to lazy embers, and soldiers are beginning to stretch, cough, and shuffle in that half-miserable, way that only comes from sleeping in boots on frozen dirt. Somewhere a rooster crows with suspicious timing, probably a private playing a prank dot. And in the middle of it all, Napoleon Bonaparte is trying to eat breakfast and failing. You duck into his tent again, unannounced, and find him poking at a plate of eggs like they personally insulted him. They're cold, he says, not looking up again. He stabs at the eggs, sighs, then sets the fork down like it's beneath him. Berthier is beside him, already reading out dispatches, as if this were a royal kitchen review and not the prelude to a continental war. You edge in behind them, eyes darting over the cluttered table. A new stack of papers has appeared, overnight notes, troop updates, weather reports, and something interesting. You spot it right away. A report written in clumsy French, signed by a name you don't recognize. It's a spy's handwriting, not poetic, not confident, but it tells a story. The Austrians are moving exactly as predicted. Napoleon doesn't read the paper so much as absorb it. He scans it once and tosses it into a pile labeled with absolutely nothing, because when you're this confident, you don't even pretend to file. They've bitten, he mutters, rubbing his temple. They're going for the right. Perfect. You lean over a bit more, trying to get a closer look without looking like you're trying. One paper stands out, a sketch, crude lines, arrows, blocks of tiny stick soldiers. It's a visual of Werther's entire plantha, Allies' real movements, the ones they think are secret. You blink. How did you get this? Napoleon shrugs, like someone just asked him where he bought his socks. Somebody always talks, he says, especially when they're sure they're winning. You don't know if he means a spy, a deserter, or maybe just a very chatty horse. Doesn't matter. He knows the plan. He owns the plan. He stands now, finally abandoning the sad breakfast. He looks rested. More than that, calm. Which is weird, given that in about 20 minutes, Thousands of men are going to start trying to end each other. But Napoleon, he looks like a man about to take a short stroll across a chessboard he already memorized. Berthier hands him a fresh pair of gloves, which he inspects like they might be lying to him. He finally accepts them with a grunt and steps outside, motioning for you to follow. Out in the frost, the French army is a whispering, steaming organism murmurs in the fog, glints of bayonets, the low clink of gear being adjusted. There's no dramatic speech, no flag waving, just movement. And above it all, the sun is starting to show itself. Perfect. Napoleon says. He turns to Soult, who's already waiting on horseback with the look of a man who's memorized a dozen contingency plans and still expects to need 13. At my signal, Napoleon says, advance the center. Break through the heights. Split them like rotted wood. Soult nods, doesn't question it. He's seen this play before. Napoleon mounts his own horse, gracefully, efficiently. He doesn't ride like a king. He rides like a courier with important news for the entire future. Then he looks at you. You'll want to stay close, he says. This part gets interesting. You follow as he rides up toward a small rise overlooking the valley. From here, you can see almost everything. The Russian and Austrian forces, already deep into their attack, pushing hard against the French right. The fog still clings low to the ground, but the center, the Pratzen Heights, is, shockingly, beautifully, empty. They left it open, Napoleon whispers, almost to himself. They actually left it open. Historians still debate whether Weyerhaeuser's plan was sheer arrogance or a tragic misunderstanding of Napoleon's movements. Either way, the result is the same. A giant, glittering welcome sign sitting right on top of the high ground, and guess who's about to walk through the door? Napoleon raises his hand slowly, holds it. You glance to your left, Soult. Men are ready. Column formations tucked behind the fog line, hidden from the Russian scouts. A breath, a moment. Then the hand drops. The center begins to move. No shouting. No bugles. Just thousands of boots hitting frost in perfect rhythm. A silent surge, like the fog itself decided to go to war. Napoleon doesn't blink. He doesn't cheer. He simply watches. They think this is the right flank, he says, gesturing toward the distant fighting. But this, he points toward the moving center. This is the blade. You glance at the eggs, abandoned and congealing back in the tent. They're cold, but the war is heating up. You step carefully along a frozen ridge, the crunch of your boots drowned out by the low murmur of war beginning to move. The hills around you vibrate with hidden motion footsteps, horse hooves, wheels dragged through half-frozen mud. It's a strange kind of sound, not thunder, more like thunder clearing its throat to your left. French columns surge up Pratzen Heights like a rising tide. They're quiet, disciplined, no yelling, no glory chants, just momentum, clean, fast, and clinical. Meanwhile, off to the southeast, you spot something weird. An Austrian officer is squinting at a pigeon, like really squinting. He releases it, with dramatic flair, as if he's just whispered state secrets into its feathery ear. The bird flaps once, then takes off toward the horizon, clearly unaware it's about to be intercepted by a hawk that's either French-trained or just extremely patriotic. Another one for dinner, mutters a French scout beside you. You chuckle. But the scout doesn't. He's too busy pulling a crumpled message from a saddlebag. Turns out, the French have been intercepting these little airborne emails for days. They don't always need to read them. just tracking where their scent tells enough of a story. And the one this morning, it's about the Allied left wing, or rather, the part that's missing. General Kienmeyer's column, the scout says, tilting the page toward the light. They're late, again. Missing troops in a battle are never good. Missing entire divisions. That's less oops and more oops. Your empire is bleeding. Historians still argue about this. Where exactly was Kienmeyer lost in fog? Misdirected by poor communication? One popular theory says his orders were written so sloppily they were misinterpreted. Another claims one of his aides dropped the orders into a campfire. You like that version? It has style. Either way, the Austrian left is now a phantom Le Mans. The Russians don't know it yet. You crouch behind a low wall of stone and watch as Soult's corps takes the heights, effortlessly, beautifully. They move like they've rehearsed it in a ballroom. A soldier next to you whispers, "I thought we'd have to fight for this. Didn't think they'd just gift wrap it." Maybe they're waiting for an invitation. You mutter back. The fog lifts just enough for you to see what's happening now, just over the next ridge. Russian troops are still advancing south, fixated on Napoleon's right. Devout's corps is beginning to arrive there, just in time. But the real drama, it's unfolding right beneath their feet, because with the Allied left gone walkabout, and their right distracted, their center is now as exposed as a man reading a newspaper in a wind tunnel. Napoleon knew. He counted on this chaos. He's always counted on it. That's his real genius, not just the tactics, but the psychology. He doesn't win by fighting armies. He wins by predicting how humans panic, how they fumble under pressure, how they lose sight of the obvious while staring at the illusion. The illusion, in this case, was that weak French right, but the trick, the trap, that was making them forget to guard their own ribs. You hear a shout from nearby two French aides, arguing over the most recent intercepted message. One of them's laughing. Kienmeyer will support from the west. He reads aloud. West of what? West of breakfast. Even Napoleon chuckles when they deliver the line. He's up on the rise now, observing everything. A telescope in one hand, a faint smirk in the other. You stand beside him again, and for a second, you swear you see it's the entire battlefield, reflected in his eyes, not just where things are, where things will be. He lowers the telescope. Remind me to send their pigeons a thank you letter, he says. An aide clears his throat. What about Kienmeyer, sire? He may still arrive. Napoleon shrugs. Then we'll be polite and defeat him, too. You almost feel bad for the Allies. Almost. They're not just losing a battle. They're losing it in stages, in layers, like a tragic opera that gets progressively more embarrassing. You scan the horizon. The sun is rising, now casting long shadows across the valley. The French soldiers atop Pratzen look like giants in the glow. You spot something else, movement along the northern woods. Could be Kienmeyer's missing division finally showing up to the wrong party in yesterday's clothes. Too little, too late, a French artillery officer points. There, he says, tapping the wheels of his cannon. Think we should let them know the war started? The general beside him waves a hand lazily. Let them unpack first. Then we'll send the invitation. Napoleon turns again. His voice is soft, almost wistful. Armies lose battles every day, but to lose a wing, he shakes his head. That's art. You're about to reply when you hear it, a sudden, unmistakable boom. One cannon, then another, not a full volley. Just a few well-placed notes. The French center is opening its voice. From where you stand, The battlefield is becoming a living thing. Pratzen Heights now throbs with power, the heart of a giant that's just woken up. French troops pour down its sides like molten silver, flanking the stunned Russians below and above it all. The Tsar is probably still convinced this is going well. You wonder if anyone's told him about the pigeons yet. The fog thickens again. Not politely, not as a gentle curtain. It pours in from the riverbanks like spilled cream over a map, erasing edges, softening lines, and wrapping every hilltop and tree trunk in wet, woolly silence. The kind of fog that makes you forget where you were going or if you were ever moving at all. You follow the sound of boots light, cautious, rhythmic down a narrow track that slopes eastward. This is the French right flank, or rather, the performance of the French right flank, because what's happening here isn't defense, it's theater. You catch up to a small unit, except they're not really retreating, not in the panicked, disorderly sense. They're walking backward, calmly, slowly, with deliberate glances over their shoulders. Muskets cradled like props. One soldier catches your eye and winks. You're not sure if that's comforting or horrifying. Behind you, somewhere in the super fog, the Russian and Austrian columns are pressing forward, confident, eager, convinced they're about to punch through and carve up Napoleon's weakened line. They're following ghosts, and you're walking alongside the cast. Historians love this part. They call it one of the finest tactical deceptions ever staged, but it doesn't feel like history from down here in the cold. It feels like a nervous magic trick. You keep waiting for someone to shout surprise, or for the trapdoor to swing open under the wrong boots. You pass a cluster of soldiers near a bend in the slope, all crouched low, listening to orders whispered with the kind of urgency usually reserved for bank heists and dinner reservations. Made 5 minutes before the restaurant closes. They're part of Devouts, the third corps exhausted, muddy but miraculously on time. They've marched through the night to get here, just as Napoleon needed. No fanfare, no delay. You can almost hear the Emperor muttering right on cue. One officer near you squints through the fog. He's watching the enemy approach. Lines of men, glittering in flashes when the sun peeks through. Heads bowed like bulls, ready to charge. They're not even checking their flanks, he murmurs. It's like they want to get surrounded. You glance up toward Pratzen Heights, barely visible now, shrouded in light and shadow. Soult's troops are already moving down both sides of it, slicing cleanly through the middle of the Allied line, and down here. The trap is snapping shut. You stop at a small stone outcropping and lean against it, heart thudding harder than it should. It's a weird feeling, standing inside a deception. You know what's coming, but the way it's unfolding like clockwork, in a foggy dream, feels unreal. The Russian soldiers to the south haven't realized it yet. They think they're chasing the main French force. They're about to find out they're the ones being hunted. One French officer paces behind his line, checking boots, gloves, powder levels. He's muttering under his breath. You catch only fragments. Too far, ... let them overextend. Wait. For the command, it's all timing now. One bad minute, one early shot, and the spell could break. The fog gives the illusion of safety for both sides. You can barely see the enemy, and they can't fully see you, but both sides know something is waiting behind the mist. Something sharp. A cannon thuds to your left loud, dull, distant. It echoes like a dropped stone in a cave. The officer beside you nods. That's the signal. Suddenly, everything shifts. The soldiers around you stop retreating. They turn. stand tall, form ranks. It's like watching a school play reverse itself in real time. The actors drop their masks, and the second act begins. Ahead, the Russians charge through the mist, still roaring like victors. Unaware they've just stepped into a mousetrap, and from behind the trees, from hidden gullies and shallow ravines, the French right flank reappears, but this time not as bait. This time as blades. The illusion dissolves. The fog doesn't lift, it shatters. You see bayonets gleam like a field of teeth. You hear the sharp crack of muskets erupting in disciplined lines. You feel the vibration through your boots as horses thunder past, hooves slick with frost and glory. The Russian advance stutters, wobbles, stops. You can hear the confusion in their voices, the desperate bugle calls, the sudden shift from where, winning, to wait, where is everyone? It's too late. Napoleon's gamble has paid off. The center is split. The flanks are boxed. And the army that marched forward into the fog now finds itself surrounded by men it thought had disappeared. You duck as a French officer shouts over the din, push them into the river. The river Goldbach lies behind the advancing Rush. Slow, shallow, frozen artery that now promises panic. You know where this is headed. The Russians will try to retreat across it. Some will make it, some won't. The ice will take a few. French cannonballs might take more. You glance upward again, toward the barely visible peak of the Pratzen Heights, and there he is. Napoleon, mounted, still, framed by the pale gold of the morning sun, his coat flapping in the wind like a banner no one dares challenge. He doesn't raise a sword, doesn't scream a command. He just watches, measuring. This, someone whispers near you, breathless. This is the moment it breaks. You want to speak, to confirm, but your throat is dry. The mist curls around your knees, your legs, your waist like it's trying to pull you back into the dream. But it's not a dream anymore. It's the trap sprung, the curtain lifted, the war revealed, and the French, they're not retreating, they're closing in. The moment creeps up on you. 1 second, you're squinting through the lingering fog, trying to make out movement in the grey. The next, the entire valley erupts in color and clarity. The sun, not just any sunrise, not your typical golden yawn. Across the sky, this is the sun, the one they'll talk about for 200 years, that will earn a nickname so grand it sounds like a movie poster. The sun of a Austerlitz. It slices through the mist like a sword, burning off the haze in wide arcs. Suddenly, everything is visible. All the chaos, all the movement, every misplaced soldier and poorly hidden flank, all of it, drenched in pale fire, and it's behind the French dot. Of course it is. You turn to look toward the Pratzen Heights, and there's Napoleon, framed in gold like someone painted him there with a very self-congratulatory brush. He watches, unmoving, as the Allied armies blink into the light like bugs caught under a lamp. The timing is ridiculous, absurd, practically. Rude Soult's men, having taken the heights, are now pouring downhill directly into the exposed belly of the Allied center, their advance backlit by that blinding sun. You watch Russian troops panic, not because of the French, but because they can't see. They raise hands to shield their eyes. A cannon crew fumbles their powder. One officer tries to adjust his telescope and drops it into the mud. The light becomes a weapon. Historians still argue whether Napoleon anticipated the sun. Did he plan this celestial spotlight? Was it pure coincidence, Or was he such a control freak that even the rotation of the earth obeyed his choreography? Whatever the truth, the effect is undeniable. You feel it, that sensation of momentum snapping into place, of events accelerating with the clean certainty of dominoes falling perfectly in line. Napoleon turns to Berthier and says, "Now begins the finest day of my life." No hesitation, no smile, just certainty. Below, the Allied lines are folding. The center, once assumed to be secure, is disintegrating. Soldiers are scattering, some confused, some wounded, some simply retreating from the sun as if it has personally offended them. A Russian general on horseback waves his arms wildly, trying to form a new line, but the commands come too late. You watch him scream into the wind as his men scatter like frightened sheep in bright daylight. To your right, French artillery is repositioning, fast and fluid. They've got the range now. They can see the first volleys arc out like punctuation. Marks, boom, boom, boom. Each one lands with methodical violence, targeted, informed, and utterly unfair. A French grenadier beside you chuckles. "I've never felt bad for a Tsar before," he says, "but I think I just did." "Only a little," his friend mutters. You glance eastward and spot the Russian command tent far in the distance. It's a mess, a circle of shouting aides, broken equipment, and one imperial standard fluttering, slightly crooked. If Tsar Alexander is there, he's probably wondering why the war he was winning an hour ago is now collapsing like an overbaked soufflé. You start to move again, following a stream of infantry cutting into the Allied center. Bayonets glint, officers shout, drummers pound a slow, deliberate rhythm, not fast enough to be inspiring, just steady enough to keep you moving. One boot in front of the other. The air smells different now, less of damp soil, more of smoke and gunpowder. The morning mist, once soft and dreamy, has been replaced by grit and light. You taste it on your tongue, and behind you, Napoleon advances, not charging, not shouting, just ... arriving. He doesn't need to be everywhere. His presence flows ahead of him like steam through a pipe. His men don't look for him. They know he's watching, always, and so they fight just a little harder. You reach a crest and pause to catch your breath. From here, the whole battlefield reveals itself like pulling back a curtain on a wildly miscast play to the north. The Allied left is too far out, still trying to loop behind the French retreat that no longer exists. To the south, Devout's corps has locked down the flank just in time, halting any Russian attempt to punch through. But it's the center that holds your attention. What used to be a solid line is now a cratered wound. Men scramble to reorganize, but it's like trying to rebuild a dam mid-flood. There's no anchor, no foothold, nothing to stabilize. And into that chaos, the French pour. It's elegant, disturbingly elegant, a blade through soft cloth. Napoleon's voice rings out behind Hulot, controlled. Advance, no pause. It isn't a suggestion, it's prophecy. You glance over your shoulder one more time and catch his eyes sharp. Unreadable, he's not smiling, not smug, just engaged. He's inside this moment, alive in it, in a way few humans ever get to be. The sun flares behind him again, and for a second you wonder if he actually is made of gold. But no, he's just a man who showed up with a plan, a pencil, and a really inconvenient sunrise. The smoke thickens, no, not mist, not fog, but real smoke. The kind that bites the back of your throat and leaves your eyelashes feeling sticky. The kind that makes you blink twice before realizing someone near you just fired a cannon. You're in the center, right in the thick of it. And strangely, there's no blood here. Not yet. Just motion ordered, deliberate, and terrifying in its precision. The French columns march down from Pratzen Heights like clock hands. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. You watch them descend with terrifying calm, as if someone whispered in their ears that the war had already been won and they're just here to clean up. Around you, officers speak in clipped sentences. Push left flank forward. Hold the column tight. No advance beyond the tree line. It's not shouting. There's no panic. It's just business, from the ridge to the east. Russian troops finally notice the movement. You see it happen in real time. One commander turns his telescope, squints, and drops it in disbelief. The French aren't running. They're here. They're everywhere. You watch a Russian gun crew scramble to reposition. Too late, French artillery thunders from behind the newly seized Heitscanon balls, streaking down like punctuation marks at the end of a very loud sentence. Boom, boom, boom. The Russian center, already tangled and confused, buckles at the knees. This isn't a battle. Someone mutters behind you. This is surgery. He's not wrong. Napoleon isn't attacking all the fronts. Not yet. Just the ones that matter. The center now disintegrating, and the flanks, which are about to freeze in place. You pivot left, toward the northern Allied wing. Its chaos units were meant to sweep south, flanking the French right and wrapping around like a grand ribbon. Instead, they're lost in the fog, too far from the action, tangled in ravines and forest and bad intelligence. And in the south, ice. You move fast now, boots slapping the frozen ground as you circle to the French right. It takes effort. There's little time, but you have to see it, because that's where Devout is, and where the real trap waits. You reach a knoll overlooking the southern flank and crouch low. Below you, the French, the Third Corps, is braced like a spring. They've been marching for 2 days straight, no sleep, crusted in road dust, probably sick of the sight of each other. But they're here, holding the line against the full weight of the Russian southern thrust. You spot a French general with his arms crossed, watching as Russian troops advance toward his position in neat, glittering ranks. He's not blinking, just waiting. When the enemy comes into range only, then does he speak. Now, muskets volley in sharp bursts. The French fire fast, but not sloppy. Each shot feels like punctuation. Each volley a full stop in the enemy's forward momentum. The Russians recoil, regroup, and press again. And the French, they bend. They always bend, but they don't break. You glance behind you toward the heights. Napoleon's center is now fully engaged, driving deep into the Allied middle, and with each French step forward there, the Russians here on the right are getting further. From rescue, it's a trap within a trap. Devout doesn't need to win this flank. He just needs to hold it long enough for the rest of the Russian army to realize it's standing on a slowly rotating stage, and the spotlight has moved somewhere else. You feel it then, the exact moment the Allies understand what's happened. A Russian officer near the center waves his saber in panic, not in command, in distress. His men are yelling, backing up, looking over their shoulders toward where their own lines used to be. But that center, it's gone, split, rolled, crushed beneath the weight of French discipline and very good sunlight. You hear it in the distance, an Austrian horn, shrill and confused. A call to retreat. It's not even noon yet still. There's a stubborn pocket of resistance in the middle. You watch a cluster of Russian grenadiers form a defensive square atop a shallow hill. Their uniforms ragged, their boots sinking in slush. They fight like men who don't care about maps or momentum, just survival. Napoleon sees them too. He through a telescope, frowns for the first time all morning, then lowers it. To brave, he mutters. Too late, he gives the order. To cannons reposition, fire, the grenadiers hold. Fire, again, they break. Napoleon doesn't cheer. He doesn't clap, he just nods, the way someone does when their painting finally dries. Below. The field changes again. The Russian right tries to pivot. Back but can't. The Austrian left tries to fill the gap, but it's already fallen through. You're watching an army get folded like paper, and all the while, the flanks hold. Fire in the center, ice on the wings. You glance up at the sun again, still brilliant, still merciless. The shadows are long, now stretching east to west like spears, and beneath them, Europe shifts. From your vantage point above the valley floor, the battle below is starting to look, if you squint, like choreography. A kind of frantic, aggressive, blood-spattered choreography. But still, the cavalry is out, and once they arrive, the battle stops resembling a chessboard and starts looking more like a very angry opera. You shift on a cold stone and watch the French and Russian cavalry weave in and out of the fog. Sabers flashing, horses snorting, plumes of steam, officers barking. Commands that dissolve in the wind. This isn't the lumbering charge of heavy infantry. No, this is quick, sharp, mobile warfare, the difference between swinging a sledgehammer and flicking a razor dot. And in this freezing valley, the razors are dancing. A French hussar bursts from the smoke, saber held high, his uniform flaring out like some Napoleonic superhero. He wheels hard left, dodges a Russian lancer by inches, then disappears again behind a shattered fence post and a column of panicked infantry. You blink. Gone. Then come the dragoons, larger, louder, mounted like they brought their own thunderclouds. They collide with a squad of Cossacks near a half-frozen creek, and for a brief moment, all you see is churned mud, limbs, hooves, and the glint of sunlight on wet steel. It's elegant in the most horrifying way. One French captain near you chuckles and mutters. They train for months to ride in straight lines, only to die in a circle. You're not sure whether to laugh or salute. A riderless horse gallops past your hilltop perch, reins flapping wildly. You watch it go, no one follows. Down. Below, the Pratzen Heights now loom behind the French center, fully secured. Napoleon's infantry continues to push outward, expanding from that central position like a ripple in ice water. But here, in the low valley, it's a different story. This is where tactics become improvisation, where soldiers stop marching in time and start listening to instinct. A Russian officer, cape flapping, attempts to rally his cavalry near a grove of trees. He lifts his sword high, shouts something heroics. Vandingand is promptly unhorsed by a French cuirassier who doesn't even slow down. The officer's body tumbles once, then lies still. The cuirassier keeps riding. No time for gloating. You're reminded of something Napoleon said earlier that morning, when someone asked him what makes a great cavalry commander. He didn't say courage, or honor, or even loyalty. He said timing. Down in the fog, you see what he means. Every clash between squadrons is a test of when to strike. Not just how, not why, but when. And right now. The French are hitting every beat like a conductor with a grudge. Historians still debate. Whether this was part of Napoleon's plan or just beautiful improvisation by his subordinates. Did he intend to unleash the cavalry at this moment? Or did Murat, eager for action and good hair moments, act on his own initiative? You lean toward the latter. Murat does have very aggressive hair. Speaking of which, you spot him now. Marshal Joachim Murat, Napoleon's brother-in-law, fashion icon, and the sort of man who wears a leopard skin sash into battle because why not? He's standing tall in the saddle, gold braid gleaming, sword raised high as he leads yet another charge down the left slope. He's so extra, but effective, under Murat's command. The French cavalry hammers the remnants of the Allied center, those still trying to reform after Soult's surprise ascent of the heights. You watch an entire Russian cavalry unit collapse under pressure, its survivors scattering like spilled marbles. The snow churns black and red, and somehow, in the middle of it, Murat is still immaculate. You can't tell if it's terrifying or inspiring, maybe both. Back near the French line, a messenger gallops up to Napoleon, dismounts, and delivers a report, his coat flapping like wings. Napoleon reads it, nods, says one word, continue. He doesn't look back. You watch as more French horsemen pour into the valley, reinforcements, not replacements. The Allies are running out of cavalry reserves. The French, not even winded. It's not fair, but war rarely is. You look down again, scanning the scene as if it were a painting in motion. Bayonets clash in slow arcs, sabers flash like silverfish under torchlight, hooves crash into shallow water, sending sprays of slush into the air, and over it echoing like a drumbeat through. The cold comes the rhythm of victory. Step, strike, spin, repeat. You realize something unsettling. It's beautiful, not morally, not ethically, but mechanically. Napoleon has built a battle that moves like a machine, and this the cavalry phases just the next gear clicking into place. Behind you, a French officer remarks, almost sadly, "They're still fighting like it's 1790. We're already in 1810. You glance over. He's not wrong. The Allied cavalry charges in waves, gallant, direct, almost noble. But the French, they feint, they pull back, they flank, they dance. It's not chivalry, it's strategy in motion. One final clash unfolds below a full Russian squadron charges Murat's line head-on. They hit like thunder. The ground shakes. For one heartbeat, you think the French will break, but then, from the left, a hidden line of French lancers bursts out from the fog. They slam into the Russians' exposed side. It's over in seconds. You hear Murat shout something, probably in French, possibly in fabulous, and the French riders surge forward again. No mercy, no mercy, no pause, just motion. Always motion. You exhale slowly, breath curling upward like a wisp of gunpowder. Smoke. The valley quiets again. Not silence, but less. The cavalry's dance is over. For now, and the next movement is already tuning up. You cross the muddy ridge toward the east, where confusion is thickest and titles are longest. The Russian Imperial Command is in chaos. No bugles now, no cheers, just the shuffling silence of men, realizing the narrative has slipped out of their hands. Their map is wrong, their assumptions upside down. And somewhere in the middle of this fog-smeared unraveling stands a 20-year-old emperor who has never lost a battle until now. Tsar Alexander I. He's exactly where you expected. To find him not near the front lines, not near the generals, but a little too close to the action to be comfortable. watching it all fall apart like someone realizing their horse has no brakes. You stop a few paces away and watch him. He's on a slight incline, standing perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, as if he's about to give a lecture at a university that no longer exists. His face is pale, waxy. His fur-trimmed coat is immaculate, too immaculate. For what's happening below, no one's speaking to him, and he's not speaking to anyone around him. Aides scurry with maps that no longer matter. One young officer is clutching a telescope like it might save his life. Another just sits with his head in his hands, repeating something under his breath like a prayer or a recipe. No one tells the Tsar what to do, because what do you say to a man raised to believe he was chosen by God, then watched God switch sides? You hear someone behind you whisper, "He's gone quiet." That's not a good sign. You agree. Alexander was never meant for this. Not this kind of this. He was supposed to be the spiritual heir to Peter the Great, the gentleman philosopher with a sword, a man of enlightenment and grandeur, not mud and musket fire. He reads Rousseau. He writes letters about ideal governance. His horse is shinier than your future, but now his center is gone. His left is lost, his right is breaking, and mirage. Cavalry is probably doing something flamboyant with what's left of his reputation. Historians argue about what happened next. Some say Alexander took personal command and issued desperate orders. Others say Kutuzov tried to intervene and was shoved aside by royal stubbornness. A few fringe accounts claimed Alexander simply walked away, not metaphorically, literally. You glance again. He hasn't moved. You hear a cannon blast in the distance closer than before. Aide de camp shuffles over, whispering something frantic into the Tsar's ear. Alexander blinks, then slowly he turns. His face is unreadable. Not fear, not rage, not tears, just confusion, as if he's still waiting for the moment where the story makes sense again. You watch as he lifts one gloved hand and gestures vaguely toward the south. A signal, a question, a half-formed sentence. No one moves. They don't know what he means. He doesn't either. Down the slope, French soldiers are pressing hard. Artillery rolls forward over crushed grass. Infantry lines realign like water, finding a downhill path. Every moment, they close the gap. One Russian general attempts to rally a battery of guns, form the line. Reform the cannonball cuts through the sentence. A fine mist of red, and the shouting stops. An aide nearby vomits into the dirt. Alexander doesn't flinch. You wonder what's happening inside his head. Is he calculating, rewriting history in real time, or is he just thinking, this was not how this morning was supposed to go? Because at WASN's single quotes, he came expecting glory, a dramatic, sweeping victory, a coronation by cannon fire. Instead, the French army has turned this valley into a very expensive lesson in humility, and now the Tsar child of destiny, darling of Salenses, watching his prestige evaporate under the bright and increasingly smug sun of a USTERLITZ. Napoleon, by contrast, is nowhere near this panic. He's back on Pratzen Heights, calmly watching the situation unfold like a man who knows the exact runtime of the film and already saw the ending twice. You hear someone to your left mutter, "We should fall back." Someone else responds, "To where?" Excellent question. You turn again to Alexander. He's taken a seat now in a half-collapsed crate, no less regal for elbows on knees, hands loosely folded, staring at the dirt in front of his boots. like it might offer better advice than any of his generals. Finally, he speaks, not loudly, but you hear it. Tell the men to hold. Tell them not to retreat unless I say. The aide salutes and runs. The order is, well, it's something. But holding isn't strategy anymore. It's just delay. The kind a man makes when he doesn't want to be the one who says the word defeat. Out loud to the west, you hear shouting against French voices. Getting closer, Alexander hears it too. He straightens slightly, pulls a glove tighter, smooths his coat. There's pride still, posture at least, but it's the pride of a man who knows. The story has shifted around him. He's no longer the author. He's become a footnote. One officer kneels beside him, holding a crumpled, ink-stained map. Your Majesty, should we, Alexander stands suddenly, sharp, clean, regal. Enough maps, he says. He looks across the valley toward the sunlit chaos, and his jaw tightens. Tell Kutuzov to prepare the retreat. And just like that, the enlightened emperor steps off the page. You head west now, boots crunching through churned frost and broken debris splinters of wood. A crushed drum, the heel of someone's boot still laced with part of a sock. The smoke is heavier here, not just in the air, but in your mouth. Your eyes sting. Your nose wants to leave your face and find a different war. Welcome to the Allied left flank, or what's left of it. The Austrians are collapsing, and by collapsing, we don't mean tactically withdrawing in good order. We mean running. You nearly get trampled by a unit of infantry trying to evacuate a field gun that's been wedged into a ditch. The horses rear, panic in their eyes. The sergeant in charge screams something about forming up behind the tree line. The men respond by dropping the cannon entirely and sprinting toward the tree line without it. Behind them, the French advance continues. Calm, steady, relentless. You crouch behind an overturned cart and try to get a read on the chaos. But it's like watching the ceiling fall one brick at a time. No pattern, no system. Just panic. A group of Austrian officers argue beside you. You don't speak German fluently, but the tone translates clearly. Someone screwed up. Someone else forgot the signal, and nobody has the faintest idea where Kine is missing. Column is hint, still missing. You stand and step through the splintered remains of a fence line, just in time to see another Austrian regiment dissolve before your eyes. They'd tried to make a stand, shoulder to shoulder, muskets raised. For about 12 seconds, it looked like a painting dot. Then came the French line, tighter, cleaner, louder, and the Austrians. Folded like a bad card hand, you turn to see a captain, throwing his sword into a creek and muttering something that sounds like, "I was promised honor." You almost want to pat him on the back. Maybe offer him a croissant, instead. You duck as a musket ball zings past your ear. Time to move. You slip between a crumbling farmhouse and what used to be a wagon. Now a wheel and a dream. There's a single cow standing nearby, chewing methodically, as if the Battle of Austerlitz is none of its business. Honestly, you respect that. Farther down the slope, the French columns have begun their pivot. They're not just pushing anymore, they're herding. Napoleon doesn't want the enemy gone. He wants them funneled directed toward a single exit so that his artillery can, well, let's just say the French cannons are already warming up. You spot a cluster of French engineers planting small flags in the ground ahead of where the Austrians are running. At first, you assume it's to mark positions. Then you realize it's the kill zone. Historians still argue whether this part was pre-planned or just a convenient exploitation of Austrian chaos. Either way, it works. 1. French officer waves his sword like a conductor. Push them left. Don't chase, guide. And so the Austrians run toward the lowest point of the valley, where the ice glistens thinly and cannonballs whistle overhead. You move along the edge of their retreat, trying to avoid being swept into it. Around you, the Austrians shout at each other, most of them clearly new to the concept of recalculating. A soldier with a torn coat grabs your arm. Where's the line? Where do we fall back to? You hesitate. What do you say? There was a line, you just ran over it. Instead, you just shake your head, and he's gone. Swept away in the tide of wool boots and cold breath. You climb a small embankment and look down on the great withdrawal. If retreat is an art, this is finger painting. Men are firing behind them. As they run blind, unaimed shots more out of habit than hope. Officers shout contradictory orders. Some try to reform plant standards, make a final stand, but none of it holds. The French are too close, too together. You hear a cheer behind you, French grenadiers pressing forward, calling out mock advice in mangled German. Wrong way, boys. Leave your shoes, we'll need them. Even in the chaos, the humor survives. You wonder if Napoleon planned that. To dot probably, up on Pratzen Heights, the French artillery is being repositioned again. Faster than it should be, almost like it's dancing. You notice Napoleon himself isn't moving much anymore. His horse stands still, his eyes sweep the battlefield. He doesn't bark commands, he whispers them, short, specific, final dot, everything is in motion except him. You look back down at the fleeing Austrians slipping, shouting, abandoning cannon and coats. Their line has dissolved entirely. It's not a flank, it's a suggestion, and now the French begin to close, not just in pursuit, in encirclement from the west. Murat's cavalry swings around, blocking off the retreat. From the north, the victorious center descends even further, and to the east, the ice waits. That's where they're going, that's where they're being sent. And Napoleon knows exactly what happens to a retreating army on a frozen lake with artillery behind it. He doesn't need to chase them, he just needs to aim. You shiver not from cold, but from understanding. You hear it before you see it, the sound of boots on ice, not many at first, just a scattered rhythm of footfalls, fast and frightened, echoing off the cold, flat sheet like a heartbeat with bad intentions. Then more, dozens, hundreds, the great retreat is funneling directly onto the frozen lake. You follow, slipping through the tree line onto a slope that overlooks the low basin. This part of the valley's shallow, wide flat was once a marsh. Now it's frozen over. A white crust stretches across the surface, mist curling along its edges. Beautiful, dot, and absolutely terrible. You glance around. You're not the only one. Realizing it, a group of Austrian soldiers has already reached the far side, staggering toward the safety of the distant road. But others, hundreds, more are still spilling onto the lake, feet scrambling for balance, muskets clutched tight, heads turning as if anyone knows where to go. There's no formation, no command, just desperation. You slide down the embankment and step closer. The ice creaks with every movement. It's solid for now, but not enough. Not for this many men. Not with artillery pointed at it, and somewhere above, the French gunners are getting ready. Historians argue whether Napoleon gave the explicit order. Did he really tell his men to aim for the ice? Or did it just happen? A convenient alignment of chaos and cannon barrels. Either way, the results are the same. You spot a French officer lifting his arm, a sentinel pause, then dash boom. The first cannonball lands far from you. A distant crash, followed by splinters of white and a scream you can't locate. Another shot, closer this time. It skips across the surface like a demonic pebble, hurling up a plume of shattered frost. You duck instinctively pointless, but it feels like the thing to do. Screams now. Real ones, not war cries, not orders. The scream of a man whose boots just went through. You glance over, a soldier's leg vanishes into a sudden hole. He flails, slapping at the air, then disappears beneath a cracking shell of white. Two others try to grab him. One slips, gone. A ripple of panic spreads across the ice like a curse. You don't realize how far you've stepped onto it until it moans beneath. Your feet, bad idea, you freeze. Not figuratively, actually freeze. Mid-step, you look down. Tiny cracks spiderweb beneath your right boot, radiating out like lightning in slow motion. You don't breathe, then a shout back. Get off the ice. It's in French. You look up and see a grenadier waving frantically from the shore. He points to a narrow plank bridge that's half frozen into the snow, barely wide enough for two men. You move, slowly, carefully. Another cannonball whistles overhead, slicing the air like a judge's gavel. Boom, you don't look back. Behind you, the lake is fracturing. The sound is unlike anything you've ever heard. A groaning, cracking, sobbing kind of noise. As if the earth itself is trying to break free of the cold. Bodies disappear, weapons clatter. Packs float briefly before vanishing. One Austrian officer throws down his saber and drops to his knees on the ice. Praying or cursing you can't tell. A moment later, the ice beneath him gives way. Gone, gone. You finally reach the far bank and stumble up the snowy embankment, heart pounding, knees aching. The grenadier nods at you once. No words. You look back. What was once a retreat has become a drowning. It doesn't last long. Just a few minutes. Maybe 10. But when it ends, the lake is no longer smooth. It's torn, pocked with holes and ripples. The surface a chaotic collage of black water, ice chunks, and a few broken standards floating sadly among the debris. Some French soldiers cheer. Others daunt single quotes. It wasn't war. It was winter. You scan the valley. The sun is higher now. The smoke thinner. The sounds fewer. The Allied army isn't retreating anymore. It's running, what's left of it. You walk slowly, boots crunching over scattered gear and shattered muskets, and then you spot them, Napoleon's staff, gathered at the ridge above the valley, calmly watching as the final remnants of the battle dissolve into exhaustion. Napoleon stands apart. He says nothing, just watches the lake, not triumphantly, not cruelly, just watching you move closer, stopping just behind him. You expect a comment, a quote, something memorable for the history books, but he doesn't speak because he doesn't need to. This moment will speak for itself, and down on the broken ice, history listens. You stand a few paces behind him. He doesn't know you're there, or maybe he does. Maybe he knows exactly where everyone is, on the battlefield, in his court. In the history books that haven't been written yet, Napoleon Bonaparte stands atop the Pratzen Heights, boots planted in churned soil, arms crossed behind his back. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. Below, the valley is quieting. Not silent, never that, but muted now. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm when you're not sure if the worst has passed or if the sky is just catching its breath. Here and there, cannon smoke drifts in lazy spirals. Infantrymen pick through the wreckage of an army. French troops still move in clusters, cautious but calm. No resistance, just the cleanup. But the emperor, he's still motionless. Statues get more credit for their posture. You step beside him, slow and careful, like someone approaching a man whose thoughts are currently rewriting Europe. You glance at his face, no joy, no gloating, no exhale of relief. Just a slight narrowing of the eyes and that ever-present crease between his brows. The one that says he's already thinking about something after this. You look out with him. The broken lake still glistens in. The sunlight, patched with splintered ice and drifting debris. Stray helmets bob like silver coins. Tossed into a haunted fountain, smoke curls above the far tree line, where the last of the Russian cavalry has disappeared into the hills. No organized rear guard, no countercharge, just the polite chaos of a full, involuntary exit. To your right, a French officer approaches slowly. Marshal Soult. He removes his hat, waits for acknowledgement. Your Majesty. Napoleon doesn't move. Hesitates. Then the enemy is in full retreat. Still no response. You wonder if the emperor already knew that, or maybe he simply doesn't consider it news. After a moment, Napoleon speaks, softly. How many hours? Soult glances at the sun. 6, sire. From first cannon to now. Napoleon nods once. 6 hours, an entire war reshaped in the time. It takes to host a very long brunch. You expect him to issue more orders. Maybe something grand for the record books, but he just continues staring. You try, again, to read his thoughts. Is he thinking about how easily it all came together? About the men lost on both sides? About what he'll say to Paris? To the world, maybe. But, probably, he's already 3 moves ahead. Soult takes the silence as permission to continue. The Austrians have left the field entirely. Reports say their columns are heading toward Vienna. Kutuzov's staff abandoned their command post an hour ago. The Tsar is gone. Napoleon's lips tighten just slightly. Of course he is. You imagine Alexander somewhere out there, cursing the frost, the fog, the fate of emperors, wondering what it means when your first war ends in someone else's script. Soult lingers, waiting for praise, or instruction, or something. But the emperor's stillness is unbreakable. Finally, Soult bows slightly and walks off. Boots muffled in soft mud. You stand alone with the most powerful man in Europe. He still hasn't moved, and the silence is beginning to feel holy, or at least borrowed from something holy, like the hush inside a cathedral. Just before someone dares speak aloud, a French standard flaps, near a battered, stained, still upright. You think of what this moment must feel like for him, not just a win, the win. His finest hour, and yet, he doesn't look victorious. He looks focused, like this wasn't a celebration, just a step. Finally, he speaks again. Tell Berthier, I want the enemy positions mapped by nightfall. Have the men rest. Only the wounded should be moved before sundown. You nod before realizing he's not speaking to you, but he doesn't correct your presence either. He simply goes on and sends someone to collect the Russian banners from their artillery lines, the ones they left behind. Hang them in the main square when we reach Brno. A pause. Then, more softly, almost to himself, I want the people to see what happens when you trust your own myths too much. You glance sideways. Was that about Alexander? Or maybe about himself? Nope. Still unreadable. He turns, finally. Walks a few paces toward his horse. A young aide snaps to attention, offering the reins. Napoleon takes them, slowly, smoothly. Before mounting, he looks over the field one more time. Thousands of men, some dead, some sleeping, some writing letters. Home that start with, you wouldn't believe it, but you expect him to say something grand. Something imperial instead, he says. Send for breakfast. And then, with the smallest sigh, he climbs into the saddle and rides downhill quietly, unceremoniously, like a man with a very long to-do list. You stand alone, the wind picks up, and across the valley, nothing moves but the smoke. The battlefield is still, not in the romantic, storybook way, in the way that follows a very loud, very short disaster. It's early afternoon, but it feels later. Time has stretched and folded into itself, like the battlefield a landscape of churned mud, snapped branches, and the quiet kind of horror that doesn't even scream. The Battle of Austerlitz lasted about 10 hours. That's it, just 10. You flex your hands inside stiff gloves, trying to remember what they felt like before. They were frozen and shaking. You've walked miles today, seen armies appear and disappear, watched emperors become trivia, and now it's just cleanup. You move slowly through the French lines. They're resting, sitting, some smoking pipes with hands so numb they can barely hold them. Others eat whatever they can find, hardtack roots, part of a sausage that may or may not have been someone's breakfast this morning before all the musket fire. There's no cheering, no songs, not yet. There's just knowing. You pass a group of soldiers clustered around a camp kettle, listening as an officer reads the casualty report like it's a grocery list. Numbers, just numbers. Some nod, others say nothing. The names, those will come later, if they come at all. You keep walking, you spot French engineers already moving cannon into new positions, because battles may end, but logistics never sleep. A cart rolls past carrying stretchers, some with wounded, others with the unlucky ones. One man is singing softly, a lullaby maybe. For himself, off to the side, a group of cavalrymen tend to their horses, most of them too tired to speak. One man is brushing down his mount with a rag that might have once been a uniform sash. He doesn't stop when you pass. He doesn't even look up. It's as if they all expected this, because maybe they did. This was supposed to be impossible. Napoleon was outnumbered, outflanked, outmatched by 2 emperors. 2 of them, and yet. You glance back up at the Pratzen Heights, still crowned in the French tricolour. The snow up there has been trampled flat. What was once a natural slope is now a symbol of what, exactly, depends on who you ask. For the French, a miracle of mind and manoeuvre. For the Russians, a miscalculation so complete it'll haunt war colleges forever. And for the Austrians, well, maybe don't ask the Austrians today. You cross the lower valley now, past shattered gun carriages and piles of discarded packs. A broken flute lies half buried in slush. Someone steps on it. It squeaks. No one laughs. Then you hear it. Letter, it's being dictated just up the hill. You follow the voice and see Napoleon, now seated beneath a makeshift canopy, coat buttoned all the way up, quill in hand. He's writing to Empress Josephine. You ease closer. He doesn't notice you. Or maybe he does and chooses not to care. His voice is quiet, deliberate, even while recording the most staggering victory of his career. The enemy's army is no more. I have taken over 40 standards, dozens of cannons. The battlefield is ours. The sun shone bright today, just as I foretold. He pauses, frowns, corrects a line. Then, with a ghost of a smile, tell Paris I am well and victorious. A scribe nearby blots the paper carefully. You watch it dry. It's not just ink. It's history all around you. Officers come and go. Couriers deliver reports, maps, observations. Someone offers Napoleon a fresh cloak. He refuses. He stands. Prepare to move, he says. Move where, sire? One aide asks. Napoleon looks east. Vienna. The word hangs there, like a dropped sword. He's not going to savor the victory. He's going to use it. That's what no one ever understands about him. He doesn't win for trophies or glory. He wins to keep moving, like a shark, like empire. Itself, somewhere, a dispatch rider gallops off, probably toward Paris or Vienna or immortality. You sit now, finally, on a patch of rock. Your legs ache. Your ears are still ringing. The sun is lower in the sky now. Not quite sunset, but close enough that the colors have changed. Everything looks warmer, softer, except the ground, which is still hard and cold. Someone sits beside you, a French soldier. Older than most, his beard is patchy, and he's missing half a glove. He offers you a piece of bread without speaking. You take it after a moment. He says, I've seen war before. This wasn't war. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It was math. You look around the valley, the angles, the timing, the trap, the rhythm of it all. Maybe he's right. The world changed in 10 hours today, and Napoleon. He's already thinking about tomorrow. The battlefield has gone strangely domestic. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but ordinary in the way disasters sometimes feel after they end. Like nothing that big could have happened here. Like the mud didn't just eat history and leave your boots soggy with empire. You walk through the wreckage now, slowly, past men building fires from broken gunstocks, past surgeons setting up tables with the quiet detachment of men who no longer flinch. The cannonballs are silent. The orders are few. The war, for the moment, is done playing loud. Now it just hums. The French troops sit in scattered groups, faces drawn, mouths busy with bread or tobacco or stories they'll tell differently by. Next week, some clean their rifles. Others swap medals like they're trading cards. One man nearby is tying a strip of red fabric around his musket like a ribbon on a birthday gift. You ask him why. He shrugs. Because we lived. A reasonable answer. You keep walking. The field is a collage of things left behind. Shoes, muskets, playing cards, love letters with names smudged by blood or snow. You pick one up without thinking. It's written in Russian. You can't read it, but you feel it anyway. You slip it into your coat. Further ahead, you see a French officer pinning a medal to a young soldier's coat. The boy is maybe 17, shaking slightly, not from fear, but adrenaline that hasn't fully left. He tries to stand tall, but it's not working. The officer grins and salutes with a wink. Don't drop it, he says. The bronze is worth more than you are. The boy laughs. Then he cries. Then he laughs again. You sit for a while on a crate, that used to carry ammunition and now contains exactly one dented flask and a slice of cheese, the color of regret. A soldier passes by, limping slightly, arm in a sling. "Where you from?" he asks. You tell him. He nods. Doesn't know it, doesn't care. "I'm from Lyon," he says. "Had a bakery. Now I'm missing half my hearing and I can smell blood through snow." "Not bad, huh?" you offer him. The flask he drinks. You watch as the medics do what medics do, quietly, competently, while trying very hard not to look anyone in the eye. You can hear the saws now, the quiet curses, the prayers that sound like apologies. Behind you, someone's building a snowman, really, to soldiers. One tall and one very enthusiastic are shaping snow into a lopsided lump with a pinnacle for a nose and a musket bayonet stuck into its side like a saber. You raise an eyebrow. The tall one shrugs. Figured he deserves a medal too. You look up to the Pratzen Heights. Napoleon's tent is still up there, though he's no longer inside. He's somewhere further downhill now, inspecting captured artillery, maybe writing another letter, maybe already imagining the next war. You've heard them whisper about Ithaman. They say that after the battle, he spent an hour alone, not with his marshals, not with maps, just by himself, sitting on a barrel, not speaking. Some say he cried, others say he laughed. Most agree he did neither. Historians will later say that Austerlitz crowned him, that this was the moment Napoleon truly became an emperor indeed, not just title, that the rest of Europe was forced, for one cold, clear day, to admit they were dealing not with a man, but a force. But right now, he just looks tired. You get a glimpse of him, finally, standing near a fire, coat wrapped tight, staring into the flames like they owe him an answer. A general walks up and says, something probably about Vienna. Napoleon nods. His crown is in Paris, but this field is heavier. You wonder how it feels. Holding the future in your hands, while still smelling of gunpowder nearby. Someone plays a violin, badly, but the tune is soft, gentle, almost sweet. One soldier claps, another boos. No one moves to stop it. The snow has started again. Just a little, tiny flakes, quiet as secrets. They fall on helmets, on cannons, on broken flags and unsent letters. They fall on winners and losers. Equally, you stretch your legs and stand. Everything aches. A cannonball lies nearby, half buried in slush, like a forgotten promise. You place your hand on it, cold, solid, perfectly round. History is like that, sometimes, shaped but never smooth. You take one last look over the battlefield and blink 'em just like that. The present catches up to you. You're still standing in that cold, muddy field, but now there are information boards nearby, faded plaques, bulletproof glass, weatherproof. Maps with arrows and timelines and cheerful graphics that try to make the slaughter of thousands look like a neat, understandable process. Welcome to the historical site of Austerlitz. A gravel path winds around the slope where French troops once stood in tight, silent columns. It now leads to a gift shop. Someone walks past you in a fleece jacket, holding a coffee. You half expect to hear cannon fire, but instead there's birdsong and the soft clicking of a distant camera. And in your head, the historians have arrived. Oh, they've got opinions, loud ones. You hear them all at once, layered like a debate that's been going since 1805, and never once took a lunch break. Napoleon's plan was sheer genius. He predicted the Allied move and executed a perfect counter. No, no pure luck. If the fog hadn't lifted at the right moment, or if Devout's cause had arrived 10 minutes later, don't forget the Allied mistakes. Abandoning the Pratzen Heights was strategic malpractice. Was it though? Weyrother believed the French right was collapsing, and he wasn't entirely wrong. You take a deep breath. Try to separate the voices. One says, Napoleon was a master manipulator, orchestrating every movement like a symphony. Another insists, he was an opportunist with good timing and better hair. A third mutters, the sun did half the work. A fourth whispers, the world wanted him to win. You shake your head, smiling despite yourself. Historians, they argue over the details, but they agree on one thing. Austerlitz worked. For one day, Napoleon's vision was crystal. His gamble paid off. His army fought like a machine with a soul. And the old world, the Austrias and Russias of it blinked in disbelief as everything they understood about war collapsed on the ice. You step into a small museum building perched on the hillside. Inside, it's quiet, dim. A single glass case displays a French officer's uniform, too small for modern mannequins. You read the placard, recovered from the battlefield, believed to have belonged to a grenadier of the 4th Line Infantry. You stare at it a long time. It's nothing special. Blue wool, faded buttons, a little blood-stained. But you remember how these uniforms moved through the fog, how they marched, how they held, how they won. Your eyes wander to another case, a Russian saber bent near the tip. The plaque simply reads, found at the southern edge of the Gold Box stream. You remember that stream. You remember how many crossed it, and how many DIDN single quotes. The historians in your head haven't stopped. This was the moment Napoleon peaked. No, it was the beginning of his end. Victory made him overconfident. Strategically, it's his greatest work. But morally, a trap is still a trap. He understood people better than anyone. He understood how to use people better than anyone. And somewhere in the corner of that mental shouting match, you remember the soldier who tied a ribbon to his musket and said, because we lived. Maybe that's the only opinion that matters. You exit the museum and wander down a narrow trail that leads back toward the edge of the field. There, a stone marker stands crooked in the frost. It doesn't say much, just a name, a date, the shape of an eagle etched into the side. You place your gloved hand on the stone, still, cold still here, still waiting for someone to decide who, exactly, won what. The sky is overcast again. No sun of Austerlitz today. Just clouds and wind, and the distant sound of someone kicking at gravel. You feel your phone buzz in your coat pocket. Probably an email, or an update, or someone arguing about something that won't matter in 200 years. You don't check it. You take one last look at the valley below, and in your ear one of the historians sighs. At the end of the day, he mutters, it was just one battle. Another voice answers, yeah, just one battle that broke the world open. You walk the battlefield one last time. No tour groups now. No school children in brightly colored jackets. Just you, boots, crunching lightly over hard-packed soil. The quiet hush of falling snow beginning to erase everything behind you. The air is soft, cold, yes but still, almost velvet. It wraps around your coat, your face, your thoughts. The ghosts are gentler here. Every path you take feels familiar now. You know the bend where Murat charged, the creek that swallowed the retreat. The hilltop where Napoleon watched the world rearrange itself under his breath. And it's quiet, not silent. Austerlitz never quite gives you silence, but something. Close, something respectful. A hush shared between eras. A breeze stirs through the branches overhead. A few flakes catch the light, drifting like ash. You glance up and imagine for a moment that this is what the battlefield looked like the day after, when the wounded were being dragged toward fires, when the living stepped carefully over the no longer so lucky, when the generals stopped shouting and started counting. Now, it's just snow. Just a blanket laid gently over mistakes, over triumphs, over all the shouting that shaped this continent. You wander past a stone wall now, barely standing, crooked with age. Someone French or Austrian. Maybe both once took cover here. Maybe they laughed. Maybe they bled. Maybe they looked toward the Pratzen Heights and thought, what a stupid little hill. And maybe they were right. It was never about the hill. It was about what it allowed. The vision, the control, the moment one man, very small in size and very large in imagination, saw the shape of the future and said, yes, you feel it here. Even now, you keep walking. The lake is frozen, again thick now, solid. No footsteps on it this time, no shouts, no thunder, no screaming horses with wild eyes. Just snowflakes resting on the surface like tiny apologies. You kneel near the edge. There are no bodies left, of course, not anymore. But you see something beneath the ice. Maybe it's a shadow. Maybe it's a trick of light. Maybe it's history, winking. Whatever it is, it passes quickly. Like everything, the sun is low, now barely clinging to the edge of the sky. It lights the field in gold for just a few seconds. Long enough for you to see your own breath, long enough to understand. You walk back toward the trees. Behind you, Austerlitz fades, not disappears never, that just recedes, tucks itself back into the folds of memory and myth, where it can be accessed by candlelight, by lecture, by dream, and tonight. It's back in your pocket, a whispered story. A strange blur of smoke and movement and wild, impossible precision. You turn once. Just before the trail ends, the valley sleeps, and somewhere in it, Napoleon still watches. Now, softly, quietly, gently, so do you. You close your eyes for a moment, standing at the edge of it all, and when you open them again, you're not quite sure whether any of it happened. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe you wandered too deep into a history book and forgot to come out. Maybe the air in Austerlitz is just thick with memory, so thick it wraps around you like a blanket and lets you live someone else's story, just for one cold, curious night. Now the snow is falling heavier. It hushes the world, one flake at a time, drapes the hills, tucks in the trees, softens the scars of the battlefield until the lines between victory and loss start to blur. There's no sound now, just the slow exhale of winter settling over the valley, and the gentle crunch of your steps fading as you return to yourself. It was only 10 hours, one battle, one decision after another, but the echoes, they linger in frost, in footsteps, in the stillness between cannon blasts and morning light. Napoleon won more battles after Austerlitz. He lost some, too. The world turned, the tides shifted, but none of them ever felt quite like this one. And you were there. You felt the frost in your boots, heard the fog whisper your name, watched the sun break across the Pratzen Heights like a spotlight on the final act. And now it's over. Let the battlefield fade. Let the flags rest. Let the drums go quiet. You've wandered far tonight across empires, through illusions, alongside ghosts in polished boots. It's time to rest now. The world will still be here in the morning, but for now, just drift.